Humanity's failed for 3 decades to decarbonize our energy system to prevent climate change. Yet average citizens still don't know what to do personally or what to demand from their politicians. In my new book, The Citizen's Guide to Climate Success, I provide the simple answers people so desperately need. For success, we must first recognize how we often delude ourselves and others about the tasks we face. Some people, biased by their link to the fossil fuel industry, try to delude us about the climate science or to convince us that each new fossil fuel investment is somehow beneficial. But even climate-concerned people propagate myths that hinder progress. Perhaps they believe all countries will soon agree on a fair sharing of the costs of global decarbonization, in spite of 3 decades of failed negotiations. Perhaps they believe that everyone must voluntarily become vegetarian or quit flying or some other extreme behavioral change. Some people hitch their personal agendas to the climate challenge, claiming that success requires abolishing capitalism or halting all economic growth or solving all global inequalities. These complexities leave the average citizen in despair. In The Citizen's Guide to Climate Success, I show how climate-concerned citizens can identify climate-sincere politicians. These politicians are implementing regulations that phase out coal-fired power plants by requiring zero-emission substitutes like wind and solar. These politicians are phasing out the use of gasoline and diesel with clean vehicle standards and biofuel mandates. Some jurisdictions are now acting effectively, but the effort only spreads if climate-concerned citizens step outside their comfort zones to engage in the electoral process, but also, as necessary, in civil actions, like boycotts, demonstrations, even peaceful civil disobedience. I deliberately mentioned only 2 sectors of the economy just now, electricity and transportation. That was deliberate. It's a good news story. First, because more than 50% of the emissions growth globally over the next 3 decades occurs in just these 2 sectors, our success here is critical. Second, because we already have modest cost technologies to decarbonize electricity in vehicles, we know the task is achievable. And third, because clean electricity and transport will clear the pollution-choked air of the cities in developing countries, they are motivated too to join our efforts, as the Chinese are demonstrating with their movement quickly to electric vehicles. Fourth, action in these 2 sectors are complementary, since electric vehicles and soon electric trucks need to be using low-emission electricity. And fortunately, this rapid, policy-driven shift to clean electricity will enable climate-sincere citizens to accelerate decarbonization by their personal choices and lifestyles. Living in a zero-emission electricity system as I do in British Columbia on the west coast of Canada, my use of an electric car and an electric heat pump means that my domestic life is almost emissions-free. Any middle-class person can afford to do the same, and many are. It is admittedly more difficult to decarbonize trade-exposed industries like steel, cement, chemicals, and aluminum, because decarbonization in just one country may cause loss of industrial production to those countries that have weaker climate policies. And this is why we need our climate-sincere politicians to impose carbon tariffs on the imports from such countries, even if these are poorer countries. Because success with the climate threat requires global action by all countries, and because the situation is urgent, we can't afford to wait until all countries agree on a fair sharing of the cost burden. So even if poorer countries don't feel they're getting sufficient support from wealthier countries, we can't bank the future of the planet on those voters in richer countries suddenly becoming far more generous internationally. The strategic path to climate success is simple. We must use regulations and perhaps carbon pricing to quickly decarbonize our electricity and transportation sectors, while spreading this effort to developing countries by our example and also by some combination of financial support and carbon tariffs threats as necessary. The Citizen's Guide to Climate Success helps climate-concerned citizens with a simple strategy of acting locally while also acting globally.